I will say this, in talking to both Ackerman and Harper for the minute and 30 seconds combined that I was able to speak to them, it seemed pretty clear to me that a directive came from somewhere. I don't know where. Again, speculation, I would assume Nike, but I don't know that. Someone told them not to talk about this, especially the way Harper phrased.
These guys had a real rough go at press conferences or media availability or / unavailability for Dan.
Even off the record. Yeah, he was recently kicked out of a conference on female athletes because he asked about a Nike study, which is funded to measure trans athletes' performances in the minors. So, kicked out. He's 2 for 2 on this. Danzy joins us from OutKick, doing great work. What's it like getting kicked out for the second time?
I want to be clear. I did not get kicked out of the Don Staley press conference. In fact, college basketball.
You didn't get kicked out. You're correct. We were not. OutKick was not credentialed for the WNBA moving forward.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah. I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's me. You guys think it's me?
No,
I do something different with my hair.
No,
I think everyone knows what.
I think it's the questions you're asking.
I think the questions
don't want to be answered.
What makes sense is not what they're doing, so they don't want to answer.
Yeah, so I went to we've been trying to reach the researchers on this Nike study since this came out about a month and a half ago now. I emailed Dr. Catherine Ackerman, who's the lead researcher, no less than a dozen times she works for, different hospitals. She works for Harvard. She works for Boston Children's Hospital, tried to reach her through every means, did not answer any of our emails. So, we thought we have to talk to this woman. We have to know what's going on. Nike's not talking. No one is talking, and she's not responding to emails. So we decided to go up to Boston and find Dr. Catherine Ackerman, which I did. And I spoke to her yesterday morning just before the conference started. And at first she was kind of, waffling about her schedule, like, oh, it's really busy. And then because I introduced myself as just being a reporter.
Yeah.
And she said, she was like, oh, hi, reporter. Nice to meet you. And she was very nice. And then after she waffled on her schedule, she goes, oh, by the way, I didn't get your name. And I said, oh, my name's Dan. I did not give my last name. And she said, oh, I've heard of you, Dan. And I know what you're here to talk about. And I was like, okay, great. Let's talk about it. She's like, I would rather not. And I was like, well, is there a better time? I understand you're busy. You got this conference going on. I know you work really hard on it. Is there another time? And she's like, it's not something I want to talk about. So understood. Like I said, she puts on this conference every 2 years. It's a very big deal. It's a 3-day conference, a lot of moving parts, under a tremendous amount of stress. Totally respect that. So I left. I thought, okay, I'm going to come back at the end of the day. After everything's wrapped up for the day, maybe she'll be a little bit less stressed. And so I did. I went back to the hotel, went back up after everybody, they were kind of having like a little mix 'em up type of thing. They had food and drinks and all that. And I happened to run into Dr. Joanne Harper, who is a transgender person, a biological male who now identifies as a female and is also a researcher on the study. And I asked Harper, what's going on with this study? Well, that's not something I'm really supposed to talk about. Like, not supposed to talk about? Is there a reason you're not supposed to talk about it? Well, yeah, there's a reason I'm not supposed to talk about it. Okay, can you tell me what that reason is? No, I can't. Okay, fine. So I go and I continue to look for Catherine Ackerman. I sit down in a chair, totally minding my own business, out of the way, just kind of keeping my eye out to see if I could spot Ackerman again. And that's when a security official and a secondary security official, I saw them come around the corner and kind of look at each other and then look at me. And I went, oh, I know what this is. I recognize that from when never mind, I'm not going to tell that story. I know what this look is all about. And sure enough, they came up to me and they were like, hey, really sorry to do this, but we're going to have to ask you to leave and we're going to need to escort you off the premises.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Well, I mean, where to start with all of this? If it was something that was beneficial, right? These are medical professionals. These are doctors that you're talking to. I don't understand the avoidance of the question, right? If you believe in your research and what you're doing, why would you not want to tell everyone about it or talk about what you're trying to find out or what you're seeing? Is this, I don't know if it's some sort of gag order from Nike now who was funding it or what's going on, or they just understand that public opinion is not going their way, so they don't want to talk about it. Can you get any sense of that, Dan, and any of your reporting or research on this?
Yeah, so that's the big question because obviously Nike won't talk to us, so we can't get an answer from them. I will say this, in talking to both Ackerman and Harper for the minute and 30 seconds combined that I was able to speak to them, It seemed pretty clear to me that a directive came from somewhere. I don't know where. Again, speculation. I would assume Nike, but I don't know that. Someone told them not to talk about this, especially the way Harper phrased, "I'm not really supposed to talk about that." And the look in Harper's face was someone who wanted to talk about it, who really wanted to talk about it. And I thought for a minute I might get Harper to break. It didn't happen, but I think at least Harper wants to talk about it. Someone got to them and said, "Do not talk about this." Again, speculation. I don't know who else it would be other than Nike. I mean, Ackerman's the one running the study. So who else could tell Ackerman not to talk about it other than Nike?
Well, and this is a study that is focusing on children and teens and taking what medications to prove
Yeah.
that males can play in female sports.
Let's be very clear here. I want to make this clear because I think some different outlets, not us, have gotten this wrong. The study isn't finding kids and putting them on these medications.
Mm-hmm.
It's kids who are already taking them and then bringing them into the study. So I know it might not seem like a big distinction, but it is, because it wasn't them like picking kids off the street and being like, "Hey, we're going to give you these drugs." It was finding kids who are already in. Now, look, we all have our opinions on that in general, but important to note that first. Second, I mean, the study wasn't, a scientific study shouldn't be necessarily to prove anything. I mean, you have a hypothesis and then you just see what happens. It shouldn't. Now, do I think they went in with a goal in mind? Of course I do. I mean, why else would Nike fund it other than to say, "Hey, look, we have the science. Boys can play girls' sports. As long as we give them X amount of medication, it's perfectly fine." I mean, it certainly would seem that's what they were trying to accomplish. But I mean, boy, that really goes against the scientific method.
I just don't understand why the gag order not to talk about it if it's already happening. You know what I mean? Like the medication's already being administered on their own decisions, parents, whatever, and they're trying to find out if this is beneficial or not. I don't see why, do not talk to Dan Z about this. Only the positive spin can be told.
Sure. So we've only spoken to Nike one time with an executive who would not go on the record, spoke to us only on background, basically as an anonymous source, and said, was very careful with the words they chose to use when speaking with me, and said things like, the study was never initialized, it's not moving forward, never really outright denied that they had either funded it or were going to take part in it, but made it sound as though at some point they backed out. Now, we can speculate again on when they backed out. They won't tell us, but when that New York Times article came out, I mean, they had spoken to Harper, I believe, at least this year, and Harper told them Nike is funding this study. So when did they pull out? That is what we really want to know. Did you pull out because it was made public that you were involved in this and you knew it was wrong? And so you were like, "Oh, crap, people know about this. Now we have to back out." These are all questions we need answered from Nike.
Yeah, in real time, I'm just thinking to myself, too, this is unusual to not even have the off-the-record sources with this. Like, if Harper wants to talk, to me, Dan, I would be thinking, well, at least off the record, maybe Harper says something. And then that's doesn't seem to be the case, that anyone, even off the record, wants to speak on it, which is peculiar to say. To me, that I take that, the perception I have of that is the study's ongoing. It's initialized, is the way I would describe that.
Again, the only thing Nike has ever told us on background is the study was not initialized, is not moving forward. Now, again, whether that means that the study is moving forward without Nike, unclear.
Right.
Did they find another funding source? I mean, because you need money for these things. And, I think that's what probably, again, total speculation here, but I think what probably happened here is Ackerman and Harper are researchers. They need money to do not just this study, but any study they want to do. Ackerman is a researcher. She studies female athletes, medical treatments. She needs to be able to secure funding. And I think part of this might be, if she burns this bridge with Nike and throws them under the bus, that might make other companies be like, "We're not working with you. We're not giving you money for anything." So part of this might also be them sort of protecting their own interests in continuing to study. Again, not just this issue, but anything they want to explore.
Well, I keep going back to why would Nike want to spend the money to fund this study? And I think it goes back to the point that Nike is a for-profit business. I think it's capitalistic. I believe Nike was seeing the possibility of a different demo. of young athletes that they were going to be selling to, that they were going to have a marketing campaign for. That now, if trans athletes are allowed to participate in the sport or the gender they identify with, suddenly we're going to have Nike campaigns for that and sell Nike shoes and gear to them. And then when Dan Z or others report on this and it becomes negative, I think they want to distance themselves from it because they didn't realize it was going to have a negative response. That's just me guessing, but we don't really know, Dan, do we? Because Nike's not saying anything, and neither are the doctors.
To your point, though, this study began in 2023. As far as we can tell, Ackerman first started discussing this study in 2023. That's when she first mentioned Nike as a funding source for the study. Who was president in 2023?
Yep.
It was Joe Biden. And there wasn't the culture has shifted a bit in the past 2 years. And we have to think about that, too. Like, it's now 2025 and this is coming out. And public perception, I think we all agree, has shifted dramatically. I mean, Americans overwhelmingly don't believe that boys should be in girls' sports or that we should be giving children puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones because they are life-altering medications that we're giving to young people, which is absurd. You know, in 2023, Nike might have thought, hey, this is a good idea. And in 2025, we're like, oh, crap, that backfired.
Well, I can also presume the athletes or anyone representing said athletes at the Female Athlete Conference wouldn't be on board with this either.
You would think not.
Well, we couldn't talk to them because we got kicked out.
Yeah.
Well, what if you identified as something that was inanimate?
I knew that was coming.
What if you identified as like, are you doing this because I'm black?
Well, what's funny,
You know what I mean? Like-
if you would have, that is really funny to throw that at them. But if you would have gone and been, I just feel like they would have answered to anyone they thought was friendly.
No doubt.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if it would have been anybody but Dan, the guy I've heard about that wrote about this, that a bunch of people are commenting on social media about the story in a negative way, they would have been like, all right, let me talk to you off the record about exactly what happened. Here's what Nike did. Here's what they said when the negative backlash, bad faith actors. We would have heard all about that. That's what Dan is in their eyes, right? We're not going to talk to a bad faith actor. You're not a reporter. You're a bad faith actor. And then it just goes round and round with that. But if they would have thought, oh, Dan's going to write something nice about our research. Here's the other possibility. They got back some data in their research that they didn't like about the difference between young boys or adolescent boys versus girls in sports. And they don't want to talk about it for that reason.
I think they should make that known, like either way. That if they're going to make it known on whatever positive result they want, if it's not great and they decide that they don't want to be a part of it, Dan, they should.
Well, and if
if
the science doesn't back up their worldview, they're going to run from it, is my point. That's also a possibility.
You're right. We've seen this before. I did a story on this in October. There was a study done in California by a renowned trans researcher, and it didn't quite go the way they wanted. And they did everything they could to cover up those results, and they were not made public. And she put up a fit about why she can't make them public, but it was pretty clear it wasn't going the way she thought it was going to go.
Did you get that same sense here?
I don't. I really think this has to do with Nike, us exposing Nike being a part of it and them sort of panicking. And if you know anything about Nike's corporate structure, they've had a lot of turnover lately. They just hired a new, head of communications. It's also possible, guys, I've spoken with some experts in this field where they've said, look, with big corporations like this, there's a good chance that people at the top had no idea this was going on. In fact, the first time they probably heard of it was they read your story, and then they went to someone and said, hey, are we doing this? And they were like, yeah, we're doing this. Like, okay, well, we're not anymore. So let's knock that off. So again, these are all questions that Nike could simply clear up. Hey, some rogue person in our science development team signed on to the study. We didn't know. And once we found out, we realized we didn't want to be a part of this. This would be so easy for them to clear up with one email. They could clear this entire thing up, and they choose not to.
You know what you've done. You've reached Keith Morrison status. Keith Morrison of Dateline NBC, you knock on the door, and they don't want to see you on the other side of the door.
Yeah. That's good. That's a compliment to you as a reporter.
I feel like Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen would be the appropriate for my demographic. I feel like Chris Hansen's the guy you don't want to see.
Well, that's
Chris
Hansen's
definitely the one you don't want to see.
Yeah.
But no, come on in. Come inside. Sit down on the sofa. Come on in.
But those that see Chris Hansen, for whatever reason, stay and drink the milk and cookies.
Yeah.
Good point.
No, put those flowers down and come over here and sit and talk with me right now.
Yeah.
That's not the greeting that Dan gets.
Keep knocking on doors, Dan.
When he asked the question. Dan, great work.
Never gonna stop. Never gonna
man.
stop knocking on doors, guys.
OutKick's own this, and so Dan's done great work with this, with the Nike element and more. I mean, the fact that no one's talking is, I don't know, baffling, even off the record.
I
shouldn't say no one, but
I think it's also a good sign that public opinion has shifted, that they don't want to talk about it because it's not something to celebrate anymore.
It's, the other side
Dan,
of it.
good job with the story.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
The other side of it is the reporting aspect.
Yeah. I think if you
it's
shine a bright enough light, Hutton, on anything, then it eventually starts to get exposed more and more. I see what Riley Gaines is doing. She was just in the state of Nebraska because they passed a bill where they separated the sexes in youth sports in the state of Nebraska. You're seeing more states enact bills like this to go along with the executive order from President Trump. So I do think that public opinion has shifted. And I look at it, again, this is my opinion. Dan's the reporter. He's giving us the facts. Mm-hmm. I'm an opinion guy. This is an opinion show. I'm giving you my opinion on it. This is not fact. I think they started a study in 2023 when the winds of public opinion were one way and the White House was one way. And then as the news got out after the White House and the public opinion shifted another direction and they started to get blowback for it, they decided to distance themselves from it and tell the researchers to shut up about it and not act like anything happened, and then see what happens in 4 more years.
I lean towards that too.
And Nike's just trying to make money. That's all they're trying to do.
And keep it quiet.
Well, now they think making money means distancing from this and not talking about it. But there may come a day down the road. It's not a moral stance. There may come a day down the road where they're going to fund another project like this if they feel like they can make money off a different demographic.